This week on Reckoning, I'm joined once again by my amazing friend and host of the even more amazing American Medieval podcast, Matt Gabriele. And we're diving headfirst into one of the strangest, most haunting, and unexpectedly human films out there, The Green Knight. What starts as a Christmas game in King Arthur's court quickly turns into something much deeper. A story about fear, honor, masculinity, and the choices that define us. Along the way, we talk about what it actually meant to be a knight and why the Middle Ages were weirder than you think, and how this film flips the legend of Gawain on its head. Because this isn't the story about a perfect hero. It's about a man trying and often failing to become one. I'm Jason Herbert, and this is A Reckoning. My name is Jason Herbert. I'm a Southerner who lives in the West. I'm a historian, an outdoorsman, and a movie buff. I like finding new answers to old questions, and this is A Reckoning. Welcome back. Yeah. So you just told me a second ago, you're like, you're afraid of running out. I'm like, I'm not, because I'll just recycle guests. I don't even care, because this is like your 75th time on the pod. You and David were like the fourth people ever on this podcast and back in the day. And like every so often, I'm like, okay. Yeah, when we did Time Bandits, which was another movie I didn't understand. Like, I think I'd come to you guys. I was like, hey, I'm starting this podcast and I don't know what I'm doing. And you're like, sold. I'm in. Yeah. Okay.
No. Anytime. Anytime you call, Jason, I am there. So
don't say that, because I'll be like, hey, I got a question.
Jason, I'm never going to run out of things to say. So I mean,
I'm excited because you were very geeked out about doing this. But like you were on Blue Sky, like, oh my god, Green Knight. I was like,
let's fucking go. This movie rules.
Okay. Let's do this. Welcome back. We're just talking about. Wait a second before we jump into this movie, like, because I don't want to show your pod at the end. I want to whore it out right now.
Okay.
Because you've got, like, we're drinking tonight. And that was the reason why I messaged you. I was like, because you used to have drinking with historians. Do you still do that?
I did indeed. Yeah. It kind of inspired the new podcast.
Really?
I don't do as much drinking, but I missed those kind of like conversations like we're having right now. It's just like two people, informal chat, kind of getting to know each other, just kind of talking about smart things. And then, people really liked kind of listening in on those things. You learn something, you have a good time. And that's the best kind of experience, I think. So,
well, first and foremost, what are you drinking tonight?
All right, so I'm going back to my roots here. I thought, like, I got to do something special for Jason. So I busted out some of the good bourbon that I have I've been hoarding. So Virginia, let me preface this. Okay. So I'm a bourbon drinker. Longtime listeners of watchers of whatever of Drinking with Historians know that was kind of my spirit of choice. I drink lots of gin cocktails and stuff like that, but bourbon, whiskey generally. Anyway, Virginia has very restrictive spirits laws, alcohol. Everything is state owned, and so it's really hard to get certain things. But they do drops of things, and so it's one of the benefits of being in a small town is like if you get something, it's relatively if the town gets something, I should say, then it's relatively easy to get something. This is all a long way of saying that. Well, I'm going to say that this is a nice bottle for me, and it is a nice bottle. But like other people with less restrictive laws, they're going to be like, oh yeah, no, I just see that at the store all the time. So anyway, I have a Colonel E.H. Taylor small batch bourbon.
I just finished that recently. I had one.
Delicious.
It's so good.
It's lovely. And I thought that especially like it's a little bit higher proof too. And like, I think short of like being high out of my mind to talk about The Green Knight, this is going to do the trick. It's going to get me in the mood. So.
It's funny because I'm actually drinking wine tonight. So I signed the lease on my new place today, which means now I've got to start.
Fantastic.
It's exciting. So for now, I've got to figure out how to like purge all of the things out of my place, right? It's like, my God. And my girlfriend, she's like, what about your books? I'm like, I don't understand. Why would you say such a thing? But among those is my very small limited liquor cabinet. So I'm actually drinking Enigma, which is a Cabernet Sauvignon. This is 14.5% ABV. So we'll see how I'm feeling about the Green Knight and if that changes over the course of many, many ounces. as we go along here. And quickly, I did promise I was going to whore out your new pod at the start, because I want to say at the end, like, let's get to the good stuff now. You've got your own pod now, American Medieval.
I do.
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. It's just been going for a few months now. Started in November of last year. The premise of it is to, we're talking about Drinking with Historians, is to kind of keep the same vibe as Drinking with Historians. Very conversational, very loose, but to focus on kind of new, interesting things about the Middle Ages, but also how the Middle Ages are specifically remembered and thought about and taught and engaged with here in the United States. So each week we have a new guest on, and they talk about some really interesting kind of aspect of their research, but also kind of their experiences, like what brought them to the Middle Ages, like how did they get interested in that, and also what their experiences are like in a classroom. Because when we talk about the United States, and I don't have to tell you this, right? Like it's a big country, man. So like the experience of me teaching here in Virginia versus, if you were to be teaching out in Colorado or, anybody else anywhere else, like it's really different. Plus there's all sorts of varieties of different types of schools. So we've had professors on, we've had high school teachers on, we've had kind of museum people on, and they all have these really interesting, great experiences. And it's just a ton of fun. Like I learned something like every day. Like I've been doing this a long time, working on the Middle Ages. I don't know if you're going to release video clips of this too.
Oh,
but
absolutely.
Like my hair is white. Like
it's looking good.
Is. Like
it's peppery. It's peppery good.
It is peppery. That is very
Clooney-esque.
generous. So it is Clooney-esque. Okay,
you're welcome for that.
I'm going to remind that. Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, I've been doing this a long time. I know a lot of stuff about the Middle Ages, but I get to learn something new and meet really interesting people every week. And there, there's some old friends on there. Our mutual friend David Perry's been on a few times. Our mutual friend John Wyatt Greenlee, the eel guy, as a fan favorite.
People love him. He's hosted this pod a couple times. He's great.
Yeah.
I love John Wyatt. Yeah. So my question is this, Matt: is it American historians who study the Middle Ages in Europe, or is there people like reimagining the Middle Ages here? Are we talking about Cahokia in 1300? Like what happens?
So yeah, I mean it's a little bit everything, because like 2 weeks ago we had Sarah Byras on there, who works at the Cahokia State Historic Park, as an archaeologist there. Kathleen Duvall.
Never heard of her.
Pulitzer Prize-winning historian. Never heard of her. Nobody's ever heard of her.
Absolutely not. Not a guy who works in native
she'll
history.
be on a little while ago. And so it's a little bit of everything. It's the period we call the Middle Ages here in the Americas, but it's also about kind of how Americans think about the Middle Ages, and that's both in scholarship but also in pop culture. Talk about video games, talk about movies, all sorts of stuff.
What a terrific segue, because here you and I are two Americans talking about the Middle Ages today.
We are indeed,
sir. All right. So I was like,
let's go.
Okay. So I was actually wanting to have you back on. Sometimes I'm like, hey, I want to have a film on and I want to talk about the film, right? And sometimes I'm like, I got this book in, whatever. And then sometimes I'm like, I just want to have this guy back on or this woman back on, right? So I was like, how can I entice Matt on? And I was like, and I think I just shot this out. I was like, you want to do Green Knight? And you were like, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I didn't even know you'd written on the Green Knight until I started playing around on the interwebs.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. Matt, you were jonesing about this last night on Blue Sky.
1,000%.
So much. Why do you love this movie?
I love this movie because it is playful, and although I think some of my colleagues would disagree with me, and I'll be honest about that, is that some of my medievalist colleagues would disagree with me about this, is that I think it's a really honest adaptation of the actual medieval poem. Because the actual 14th century medieval poem, which is called Gawain and the Green Knight, on which this is based, is super weird and odd and interesting and delightful in all these kind of kooky ways. And it's the way that David Lowery and Dev Patel kind of made this film, along with all the other kind of amazing actors that are in there, Joel Edgerton and Alicia Vikander, sorry. They just kind of go with it, and it sets kind of a mood for the medieval period while also telling like an incredibly interesting human story.
Yeah, I think one of the cool.
How's that?
Well, I think one of the cool things about this, Matt, as you go through, is like, wait a second. I think sometimes when you're not a medievalist and you're maybe not familiar with it, you look back and go, "Oh, they take." It seems weird, Matt, that people would tell weird stories back in the day, but of course they would, because they're humans, and that's what humans. Of course, there are giants and talking foxes and all this. But it's an odd thing to think, because you think, I think maybe sometimes there's a perception that it's very straightforward, it's very serious, and all these things, and that fanciful things, weird mythology things wouldn't be there, but absolutely it is. Let's brush this down just a little bit, because we've talked a little bit previously on the pod, so forth. But let's bring this back down. This is an Arthurian story. It's rooted in the world of this. I love the casting of Arthur.
So good,
like, so good, amazing, right?
Yeah.
His voice, he's so good. Where does this Arthurian tale come from? Essentially, what I want to get to, if people have never listened to this pod before, if they've never really dived into this before, is like, how real, like, what's the reality behind Arthur? Is he a real dude? Is it a story? What's going on with him?
All right. So great question. I will point out just a little Easter egg. The king and the queen are never named in the film. In fact, they're not even credited as Arthur. They're just king and queen. But we know this is our, like, it's not ever said to us, but everybody already knows. And that's really important, because that's part of the Arthur myth, right? That is part of something that the King Arthur stories did, both in the Middle Ages and in today, is that you can create a certain scene. Like, that castle that you see, that's Camelot, because you know that mythos. Like, it's part of kind of even American kind of culture nowadays, from all the, pop culture and a little bit of, maybe history that people consume. So Arthur hasn't always been there, though. So it really started out, this guy named Nennius from the early Middle Ages. He seems to be the first guy who ever, in a textual source, seems to have mentioned a king named Arthur. It's not particularly kind of important in this particular text from the early Middle Ages. Just kind of, he was a pre, kind of an old Briton, when the Romans were there, the Britons who were there, an old British king, kind of at the time of the Romans or something like that. And it's really not until Geoffrey of Monmouth, who's writing kind of in the 12th century, in which he develops a story about Arthur being a great king of the past, one who united England, who developed this kind of mythos around him. Because after in the middle of the 12th century, then you start to get romances and epics, what we would call fiction, right, being written about the time of this great period. And that's when you start to see these other characters start to fill in. People like Guinevere, Lancelot, Gawain, Yvain, Percival, the quest for the Grail. All that stuff kind of gets added kind of in bits and bobs by first by this guy named Chrétien de Troyes, an author by the name of Chrétien de Troyes, and then also by other authors by like Marie de France. She's another kind of Arthurian writer, a woman, very interestingly and importantly, writing at the court of King Henry II of England in roughly the same period, in the 12th century and stuff like that. What's really cool about all of this is that these are all interconnected in ways that would really be surprising to us. And the way that when David Perry and I tried to write about this movie for the Smithsonian Magazine, you can go Google it if you want to find it, is that we tried to describe it as that, like, one of the great things about the Arthur mythos is that it's almost like a modern multiverse
very much
story.
Right.
Because every story that you have, historical or romantic or epic or whatever, like, they're the same characters. Like, you know that Arthur is the same, Gawain is kind of similar, Lancelot's kind of similar, but they do different things. And oftentimes those things can be complementary, but sometimes they can be contradictory, right? Gawain, for example, like is he's kind of an ever-present figure in these things. He's often very close to the king. He's sometimes related to him, oftentimes related to the king, but he's always kind of one of the great, most noble knights, the most chivalrous, the most dutiful, one of the most handsome, does all the greatest deeds and stuff like that. But then there's also stories in which he kind of behaves kind of unchivalrously. Shitty,
I think the shitty.
Shittily. That's exactly what.
Shitastically, yes.
Yeah. Yes, that is the negation
the old English
of chivalry. Yes. So anyway, so you have all these characters that are kind of orbiting around Arthur, in which they're kind of playing with these stories, and that's one of the great things about the movie. I think is that it's positioning itself as another version of these stories, that it's interacting with everything, but it doesn't need to be retelling it or like superseding it in a different way.
Yeah. So I dig that too, right? Because I keep thinking about this idea of Arthur as like the first superhero or something like that in English culture.
Mm-hmm.
It says so much about what we're trying to do, and I guess that's the cool thing about this story. At least what we're seeing is that ultimately you're just trying to get down to this human condition, and this movie zigs and zags. Yeah. I'm wondering, Matt, if maybe the tales themselves kind of because you're thinking, oh, there's going to be this redemption arc or this, that, and the other. It's like, oh, wait, no, this doesn't go like I thought it would. Yeah. It doesn't let you off the hook.
No, it doesn't let you off the hook. And I mean, Dev Patel, like fucking genius casting.
I want him as Bond,
for him. I mean, like that man is just amazing in almost everything. Making another medieval movie right now, kind of a, I don't know if you saw this, it's called The Peasant. It's been likened to kind of a medieval John Wick. So that should be a heck of a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, sign me up 1,000%.
I already scheduled you in my head as you were saying that. So go ahead.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Dev Patel. So Dev Patel as Gawain, but it sets it kind of earlier. So almost always in the Arthur stories, in the medieval Arthur stories, I should say, we've already met Gawain after he's grown up. Like he's already the Knight of the Round Table. He's one of the greatest knights. He's had all these adventures kind of behind, and he's kind of an orbiting character in every other, like in other people's stories. So Lancelot goes off and does something. Gawain is always kind of at the Round Table. He comes to help sometimes in these different stories. Yvain, another kind of great knight, kind of goes off and does something, but he's trying to be like Gawain because Gawain's already made. And so what the Green Knight does, the film does, is it pulls the thing back and it says like, what was Gawain before Gawain? And in the actual medieval poem, again, the 14th century medieval poem, which we have, it exists in a manuscript. It lives in the British Library. It's kind of delightfully illustrated. You can look up kind of pictures and see the Green Knight and see people chopping off people's heads, and it's kind of great. Is that it's not doing exactly that, but it's still playing with this idea of like, well, what if we focused on Gawain? Like, what about this guy? Like, what decisions would he make when confronted with things like you were saying earlier, like that are magical, that are weird, that kind of are a little bit unclear about how you should act in certain situations. Yeah,
this is a fascinating thing where he's first encountering the Green Knight, and the Green Knight, he puts down the axe. He's essentially, and he's almost announcing to everybody, he's like, I'm going to cut off your head. Now, everybody cool with that? I'm going to do it. It's like he doesn't.
Yep.
No, he's not self-assured. He's not knightly like we imagine. And so much of this is very much myth busting. Is like the idea of like, I guess maybe the idea of this Camelot, this what a knight does and is, and the self-assurance. And Gawain has none of that.
Yeah, and it's super weird. Like in the film, right? Like you can see like it's pretty subtle, but like Arthur and Guinevere, like the king and the queen, again, like unnamed, like they're disappointed.
Yeah.
Like they're disappointed with the way Gawain acts. The knights are kind of like, they start cheering and stuff like that because it's like an adventure. But like it's really meant to be, I think the audience is seems to be meant to understand that Gawain's fucked up. Like this guy comes in, he says like, you get to do to me and then I'm going to get to do to anything. And like Gawain just cuts off his fucking head. Like, come on, man. Like that's not like, he could have just like
nicked him.
And he even says, the Green Knight even says, you could just give me a scratch. You could just whack me on the shoulder.
Right.
And we go on our ways. But like, he's like, no, I'm going to cut off your head, boy. So, and it does not work out well for him in the end.
No, it doesn't. And I feel like so much of this, you and I both have sons. You and I have both been through adolescence. And so much of this study is like this character study of like not knowing as a young man. And, Gawain doesn't, how
you're supposed to act. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So his dad's not around. Right. And
he's not.
Here's the great part about being a young man. Every one of us have daddy issues, no matter how great your father is. And this one gets right because he doesn't know what to do. And even the guy who's really supposed to be his father figure, is really saying, I should have done more for you. I really should have had you here on my side. I should have taken you on my knee as a baby. You're my nephew. I should have, Arthur's saying I should have been there for you. And so Gawain kind of, he's partying, he's doing the stuff. He's kind of whoring around. He's a loose cannon. And now he's confronted with, here's my moment. Let's make the most of it. Yeah,
I can prove myself in front of all these people that I kind of look up to, and my kind of very absent father figure. So like, I'm going to do the biggest thing I can.
Yeah, and then what he does, what's he do is he oversteps, he over projects, and all of these things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I couldn't help but notice. First thing I'm watching this thing, I write down on my notepad. I'm like, it's blue. You and I have talked about this about the cinematography
Yeah.
of the Middle Ages, about what
Yep.
the Middle Ages look like on screen. How do you feel about the way because I feel cold watching this movie on purpose. It's at Christmas time.
Yeah.
But how does this jive with you? Because you've had some beef with like the way it's presented in the past.
Yeah, I think, so, if you're unfamiliar, like if any of the listeners out there, like you're unfamiliar, like just go watch a medieval film. Like you're going to, like, it's almost always filmed through like a blue filter. Like there's no sun in the Middle Ages. Like it just doesn't exist. Everything is overcast all the time. And the Green Knight, I think is doing that, but it's playing with it a little bit because the colors become really important. Like one of the things we should talk about is like why green.
Yeah.
Right. Like green is just such a pervasive color. Right. But everything is just like kind of cloudy. It's a little bit dark. But then, it seems like as he's kind of moving through this journey, there are moments in which the sun starts to come out where he's being like illuminated, if you will, kind of learning something along the way until he gets to the very end and, kind of gets to the chapel and things are bright and lush and kind of, it's still kind of ruiny and a little bit kind of dark agey in that way, but at the same time, like it's creating a vibe, and I think that's one of the great, really lovely things. The things I really like about it is the cinematography too, just the way that the shots are framed, and how just by the visual images there, you get a real sense of what is trying to be conveyed. So this is a long way of saying like I'm okay with it in this particular case. In some ways, because it's trying to get across the vibe that I think the poem itself is trying to get across, which is uncertainty, a little bit of weariness, but at the same time danger, because we don't know what's like, we meet the Green Knight very quickly. Spoiler alert, like he survives the beheading, and then has to go, Gawain has to meet him a year hence and, have his own head chopped off. So we don't know what's going to happen there. Right. But we're kind of fearful about that. And I think that darkness, or well, at least that the color scheme, the color palette seems to kind of convey that those ominous tidings that are coming.
Yeah. You mentioned the cinematography. One of the things I was really paying attention to is whenever, he arrives at Joel Edgerton and Alicia Vikander's place, and like they switched to almost like this fish lens, and it just feels like all this Mad Hatter-esque weird. He's so clearly uncomfortable with what's going on. And by the way, I've said this before, Joel Edgerton in everything always is kind of my film motto.
Oh my God,
he's the best in everything.
Can we just pause for a second? You've seen Train Dreams?
Oh God, yes. Oh yeah,
gorgeous.
Oh my God, what a film!
Amazing.
I thought had Sinners not been Sinners, I thought Sinners was the best film of this year. I really didn't know what to make of one battle after another. But like, I thought Sinners was a masterpiece, but I thought the cinematography in Train Dreams and just I actually thought Edgerton was better. I thought Edgerton was probably the best actor this year, and he wasn't even nominated. And I was like, he's so good at being inward. When you look at him in like Warrior, where he every time I watch Warrior at the very end when he's fighting his brother and he starts telling his brother that he loves him, I start crying. Literally every single time. Yeah. I lose my shit because it's so damn good. But he's amazing in everything.
But anyway, back to their house, right?
It's so weird.
It's weird, right? And it's supposed to be, and in some ways, like that should be the most familiar, comforting thing to Gawain, right? Like this is the atmosphere he grew up with, right? Like he grew up around King Arthur in Camelot with lords and ladies kind of around him, every kind of decadent, nice fires and furs and food and stuff like that. But it's unsettling. Right. And it's supposed to be, because, and it kind of emphasizes too, like he's always under surveillance there. Right. Like even by the blind, like grandmother, right. Who's just kind of like creepily in the corner. It seems like in every room. So I think the images do a lot to show like Gawain's increasing discomfort as he's moving through these things and, meeting all these increasingly weird people.
Yeah. So. First person meets Barry Keoghan, who is amazing, but also just weird. Also another guy is like just awesome in everything.
I'm sorry, Barry, but like he plays really good, weird little guys.
He's so good. I can't wait to see him as the Joker. But there's definitely this unsettling aspect as far as his journey goes. And then there's this real question that when I go into this, I'm like, okay, the Green Knight, there's going to be a battle, there's going to be a thing. And this isn't real. This is a really inward film. Is there a villain?
Yeah.
Matt, is there a bad guy in this movie? It's the patriarchy.
Well,
David would say it's the patriarchy.
It could be. It definitely is. But it's not wrong to say that, because like we were talking about, like the constraints that masculinity puts on kind of the ways that people behave. Like Gawain acts in certain ways and gets him into a lot of trouble. Right. Throughout, not just with the Green Knight,
right,
but like when he interacts with the Barry Keoghan character, the kind of scavenger, like he behaves the way he thinks he needs to behave, rather than seeing like, this is kind of sketch, right? Like I don't know
now.
that
this is what I think a knight does. This is kind of what he's
exactly
doing, right?
Exactly. And then even more so when he meets Winifred. Which is just such a weird, delightful kind of vignette there, which is played. I don't know the name of the actress. I've seen her in a bunch of things, but she's phenomenal in that as well. Like he tries to touch her at one point, and she just looks at him and says, "Don't do that. Don't touch me. What are you doing? Don't do that." And then he asks like for a reward to like help her out, and she's like, "Why would you ask me that?" Like again, like he feels that he needs to act in a certain way, and like he's always chastised along the way. When he gets to the Joel Edgerton and Alicia Vikander's castle, like he behaves in a certain way, and it gets him into trouble. Like he doesn't behave the way he should towards Joel Edgerton's character in the poem. It's a guy named Bertilac, and then Bertilac's wife, Alicia Vikander, who brilliantly is the same actress who plays his girlfriend from the beginning of the film. In case nobody noticed that, it's the same person. Very intentional. So again, and then he acts a certain way towards her, which gets him into trouble, and he has to flee the castle because he's so embarrassed by his behavior, blah, blah, blah. So the masculinity is kind of a part of that. But I think it's actually one of the neatest things I think that the poem does is that it allows for like these multiple stories to be happening at the same time. So this is a long way of saying Dev Patel or Gawain is both the hero and the villain at the same time. And what I mean by that is that he's the protagonist. I mean, he's kind of the main character, and he does the right thing in the end. And I don't know how much you want to kind of go into spoilers about what happens at that last encounter, right? So he has been gifted at the very end, just to kind of get that out of the way. He finally meets the Green Knight. He finds the Green Chapel a year. He's going to take his blow. He's kind of cowering from it. And then he finally, at the very, very end, and we'll get to the stuff that happens immediately before that in a second, but at the immediate end, takes off this kind of magical sash that he's been given, which will protect him. So he's willing himself. He's not taking a shortcut. He's accepting the consequences of his actions. And the Green Knight says, basically like, well done, you've done the right thing, and says off with his head. So it's a little ambivalent. I don't think he actually cuts his head off, because he doesn't cut his head off in the poem at the end. But immediately before that, he has this kind of vision of himself running away.
Right.
And going back to Camelot, succeeding Arthur, becoming king himself, and then literally everything falling apart. He alienates the mother of his child, who he's deeply in love with. His son gets killed. He ruins basically Arthur's kingdom, which is destroyed, and he's kind of killed at the very end. But subtly too, in every encounter that he has with the scavenger in the woods, the Barry Keoghan character, with Winifred and stuff like that, he is both the person who has wronged those people and the person who survives. Like it cuts for a minute to him still tied up as a skeleton in the woods before it shows him escaping. The way that Winifred describes her attacker who tries to rape and kills her in the story is basically him. And in fact, she says, like, maybe it was you who did this. So that's what it's kind of doing, is like in each of these situations, Gawain has the choice about how to behave. And we see, the film follows kind of the better choices, but it suggests that he made worse choices in other cases as well. And I think that's why I would say like he's both the hero and the villain there, is that we get to experience what a knight should be doing and the way a knight oftentimes did act in these situations, which is not so great.
Well, I feel like that's the reason why this makes such a cool thought piece on like the human condition, right? Because you are capable, Matt, of choosing the bad path or choosing the good path. And hopefully in life you choose the good path more, right? but you are absolutely, we talk about the humanity of people, almost like the word humanity is like this good thing, but I don't know necessarily that that's the case.
Yeah.
And in fact, you bring this up, the idea that he's both the hero and the villain. I was on another deep thought piece film called The Fast and the Furious recently, and we were just talking about how every single person is the star of their own film, right, in their own lives.
Yeah.
And like these main characters are the side characters. They're the side characters in someone else's story. So the way that they perceive Gawain may in fact be as the villain or as the bad guy as they come along. I do want to get to this idea though, and I hate to bring history into this history episode.
It's the worst.
I know, right? But there's the sense here of the idea of what a knight should be.
Yeah.
And we don't really get that spelled out because we think that Gawain's trying to find it somewhere and he's acting like he thinks it should be. But is there a real spelled out case, Matt? Because we see this all over pop culture, all over film.
Absolutely.
You watch these like Knights Are Glorious or this, that, and the other. I just recently watched Knight of the Seven Kingdoms and that completely took that away. I loved what they did with that in a lot of ways. What does a knight do in the Middle Ages? Or are there multiple cases?
So I think, I'm going to put on my historian hat and say,
how doth that now be? Okay, good.
It's complicated.
All right.
But the image that the Arthurian stories, both in the Middle Ages and the way that they've transmitted into the early modern period, into modern retellings and stuff like that, is transmitted like this idea of kind of chivalry, right? This is a term that we all kind of associate with knighthood, and for that, like knights are supposed to be virtuous, and now the types of virtues that they can carry, like they kind of depend, but honest, loyal, brave, chaste, oftentimes, etc. Like just really kind of good, upstanding models of kind of individual masculinity, both kind of in a medieval period and as in the later period. The thing is that the idea of chivalry as a concept is a very late medieval invention. And so we have lots of kind of warriors, you would call them knights. There's several different Latin terms that we translate now as knights. So there's not like, the idea of like a connects or something like that. That's a much later, early modern, very late medieval kind of term, but we kind of project back. But that being said, is that people understood that warriors could not act in those ways all the time. And in fact, they didn't act in those ways all the time. I mean, traveling bands of armed men would be a real danger throughout most of the Middle Ages to peasant communities, to individual landowners and stuff like that. And so what chivalry is actually doing in the late Middle Ages is it's oftentimes trying to project onto this class a mode of conduct that they want them to aspire to because they know they're not behaving in that way. So Gawain, for example, is the ideal knight as ideally like a model for emulation. Is that, and if you think about it, like Lancelot's a better swordsman within the Arthurian universe, but, he has an affair with the queen. That's not so great. Percival is, the purest kind of heart and stuff like that. He's eventually allowed to kind of find the grail because of his kind of chastity, but he's so single-minded, he kind of neglects kind of larger concerns about kingdom and stuff like that. Arthur is a king, so he has to make decisions of a king, so he can't act the right way in certain things because he has to dispense justice and he has to make unfair decisions for the good of the realm and blah, blah, blah. But Gawain gets to stand kind of outside of that. And so what Gawain, the poem does, and then the movie kind of pulls through as well, is like, what if he didn't? Like, what are the choices that are actually involved in trying to be the best knight? Because Gawain throughout, Dev Patel's character in the film, like he's always trying to make the right choice. But like we were talking about, like he doesn't really know what that is. And there's nobody around kind of helping him. Like he says he wants to be a knight, but as you mentioned, like in this really kind of emotional, like surprisingly emotional scene, like Arthur says to him is like, I don't know you. Like I never asked to, like you never even sat on my lap. You're my nephew. Like you never even sat on my lap when you were a baby. You were a baby. Like I've never reached out to you. I've never asked you to like spend any time with me. Like, and then, the Christmas feast happens and Green Knight shows up. He's surrounded by all these knights. He's not sitting with any of the knights. Like he's not hanging out with those guys. He's got his kind of little band of friends that are kind of off in the corner. And so every instance, like he's trying to figure it out and along the way. His mom, who is a present, character throughout, like she's not the one offering any advice or guidance kind of, she sets the whole thing in motion. And I think it's very clear. Like she sets the whole thing in motion. But again, like is not kind of guiding him in any way. Like he really needs to be figuring that out. And I think that's what's super interesting about the poem itself, because the poem is doing something very similar, is saying like, let's deal with the reality of what warriors are in this age of supposed chivalry.
I want to ask you about religion. We're a few days past Easter now. I'm looking over your right shoulder, and I'm looking at the copy of Oathbreakers on your top shelf, available for purchase now. It's bookstores everywhere, and I can't help but notice, Matt, the very conscious decision on the part of the bookmaker to show that sword, hilt and pommel, which very much looks like a crucifix as I'm looking at it right now, right? And that's the question I've got here is, what's the role of, are these devout Christians in the Middle Ages? Is that everything? Because Gawain's mom isn't practicing any form of Christianity I'm aware of. But I've, maybe because I grew up Baptist, I don't know. So my question is, how devout Christian were people in the Middle Ages? What's the role of religion? Is this guiding him? And then are there other religions that they're kind of hanging around in this era?
Yeah. So I think in the poem, in the actually, 14th century poem, it's a lot clearer. Like there's magical things that happen, but there's not necessarily people who are kind of behind them. There's a natural world that exists kind of beyond our understanding within the world of the poem, right? That could do strange things. These are all potentially part of God's creation. And this is very common in kind of late medieval stuff, is that travel narratives would talk about dog-headed men who live at the edge of the world. This was like a thing, like, people understood that, there's weird stuff out there. You can encounter weird stuff that's inexplicable. It's all part of God's creation. That doesn't, undermine anything. What the film does, though, is that it really plays up this kind of tension, right, of some of the Arthurian legend about Arthur existing at a time just when Christianity is showing up in Britain. So you have this kind of polytheistic, kind of druidic, stereotype of kind of the English community. At the same time, Arthur himself is Christian. There's another kind of retelling of the Arthur myth, a novel called by Lev Grossman, which does kind of a similar thing. Is that like Arthur's the Christian, and then there's kind of these pagan or polytheistic kind of holdouts at the same way, in the same time. And I think that's kind of what it's doing, is that it's not just it's Gawain's mother, but it's Arthur's sister, who is not the Christian. She's a witch. She's accused of being a witch, but she certainly has some sort of connection to kind of summons the Green Knight at the very beginning, and is involved in other magical things that are kind of happening. So this is all a long way of saying Christianity is what it is when it is it. So this is a version of Christianity that would be recognizable, I think, to Christians of a certain period, in that some people did, like you could go to Mass like on Christmas or on Easter or something like that, and then you would go home and you'd have healing spells or something like that would allow you to connect to other kind of or other type of supernatural beings around. This is not to say that everybody was like this, but it certainly wouldn't be, out of the realm of possibility. So, the Christianity seems to be kind of an overlay in the film, in which it's kind of there, but it's not the most important thing. But it seems to be more directed, as I'm kind of reading it, as directing you towards thinking about like there's another world that we can't see and sometimes interacts with ours, and God is one of those things. The Virgin Mary is one of those things, but there's also talking foxes and giants and witches and all sorts of ghosts and things of that nature as well.
One of the amazing things about this film is the casting of Patel. Right. And I don't want to focus too much on race, but I feel like it's an important thing to talk about here. Because every time there's a Viking film comes out, there's inevitably someone who complains that Idris Elba is the god of this or that or the other, and they've got no problems with the potatoes on the screen. And I'm kind of wondering, Matt, can you speak a little bit towards the diversity of, say, the medieval world? Are people moving around continents to continent? Like, what do the people of the Middle Ages look like in Europe?
So I want to say that any kind of pushback about casting of this is just dumb fucking racists. So let me just be extremely clear about that. Because what you're actually commenting on is not the fact that there's a talking fucking fox throughout most of the film. It's that, or giants, or, a green knight whose head can come off and then lives in a green chapel in which he's kind of melded to the stone or something like that. It's the fact that, like, hey, there's a guy with not white skin, like that's your big problem. So fuck off. Anyway, but back in the Middle Ages, the other thing that these idiot racists don't get is that although phenotypically, like, most people's skin would be white, is that understandings of race were very different in that period. And especially in a period in which this mythological figure, let's be clear, named Arthur, kind of supposedly existed, which is kind of late Rome, kind of right transition to the withdrawal of Rome right after that period. So like 5th, 6th, 7th century, something like that, is that there are still people moving all the time throughout Europe and into and out of Europe from Africa and Asia. So, for example, one of the first archbishops of Canterbury, which becomes the most important seat, one of the people kind of responsible for Christianizing the island of Britain, is probably from Turkey, right? And then one of his successors was another person from somewhere in North Africa. It's just somebody of the African race. That's kind of the best that we know about this. And David and I talk about this in our other book, which is over my other shoulder, called The Bright Ages, in that in this period, although England, for example, especially in a lot of popular culture, is thought of to be this exclusively white Christian space, it is absolutely not. And this is backed up not just by textual evidence, but by archaeological evidence, in which ancient DNA testing in cemeteries in places like York and Kent in southeastern England and Cornwall in the West and stuff like that, like, they found people of African descent. Like, and we don't know this for sure, but they would almost certainly not have white skin. And importantly, we know, from the layout of the graves, these people were buried amongst and related to oftentimes other people in the graveyards. They're integrated into these communities. It was not weird at all for somebody from North Africa to be in northern England, even in the quote unquote darkest of the dark ages. That doesn't mean everybody was by any stretch of the imagination, but the idea that somebody dark skinned could be at the court of Arthur. And in fact, some of the Arthurian legends like talk about people from Africa being members of the Round Table, right? And so, like, this is not a weird thing. It is in fact a genius bit of casting, because he's phenomenal in this role.
He's phenomenal in there. Have you seen the film Lion?
Yes.
My girlfriend alerted me to it, and we watched it on the watch party. And I was like, of course, I'm learning as much as I can about Indian culture as I possibly can right now. And I've got stuff I'm cooking tonight, but it's like, he's so good. He's so good in everything. Why? And I love
his other recent one, Monkey Man. If you haven't seen that one,
that's John Wick as well.
Phenomenal.
He's
phenomenal.
I'm telling you, I want Dev Patel as Bond. That's my Bond.
He'd be
choice.
So good.
He'd be amazing. And there's this whole other discussion about Patel's, like, Amy and I had this discussion about Patel's acceptance into, like, white culture, how he's, there's very much in India, very much a sense of skin raciality as well. Right. Yeah. And like him being almost white passing in some situations because of the way he looks and because of the way he acts and stuff, because of his success and stuff. And there's a whole other dialogue now that Fletcher will probably delete out of this podcast. But I think it's an absolutely fascinating study. And Patel is so damn good in this. Yeah. And this kind of leads into the next question, Matt, because you and I grow up in the 1980s and we're watching movies left and right, and the Arthurian legend, Middle Ages stuff. We watch Highlander, which is obviously very much influenced by the Middle Ages, things like that. What is this film doing correctly that other Middle Age films just don't do right?
I think it goes back to something we were talking about at the beginning, is that it is taking the story seriously, but not itself seriously. And what I mean by that is that I think one of the problems with, and people like different types of movies for different reasons, is that a lot of the Arthur movies, they try to play it as only an action film. Like that's all it is. So I'm thinking of like John Borman's Excalibur, which is still a pretty good movie. But like some of those kind of 80s and 90s and early 2000s kind of remakes of the Arthur legend. The Connery one, First Night. There was that one that was, I think it had Clive Owen in it, maybe, like was kind of
really bad. Not good at all.
It was really bad. And it was just like, all right, man, like, just like, that's fine. But like, it doesn't capture, like, because you're dealing with a historical source that's really tenuous, and that has like it presents itself as a historical source, but I think people in the period would have understood it in a very different way, like as much similar, more similar to what we would call kind of fiction, like these romances. And I think that's the thing that the Green Knight does really well, is that it takes the material seriously, but then it also doesn't feel totally wedded to it, and it allows for moments of humor. It allows for moments of emotion. These people aren't cardboard cutouts. There's real stakes, kind of emotional stakes about like kind of what's going to happen. But at the same time, like, you know, you feel that like there's a sense of possibility and choice, like, which is another thing we've been talking about, like that Gawain could be choosing differently, like something else could kind of happen. And in every other version, not every other version, so but you know, other versions, then I think it's a little bit too straight laced. I think it's a problem. This is just going to be my slight tangent, and you know, people, you can cut it out or something like that. It's a problem people run into when they adapt Moby Dick for the screen. They treat it as an adventure story when it's so much weirder than that. Mm-hmm. Right? Like it is sort of like it's a gay whaling romance, which has some things of adventure, but it's like super kooky and funny and interesting. And if you tried to do that, I think you could actually make it a much more interesting film than kind of some of the kind of dead-eyed adaptations that we've had. And I think that's one of the problems that the Arthur movies run into.
I wanted to ask you this idea. Again, there's this book over your right shoulder called Oathbreakers. And so much of this comes down to will he or will he not keep his word? And I'm like, all right, do the noble thing, man. Yeah, it's going to you're going to die. We're all going to die. I'm like, and he gets up there and we're so let down, Matt, because he's cowardly. He's like, this guy we're rooting for is like, okay, get up there, do your deed. And like, maybe the Green Knight will let you off. It's a game, which means he can do whatever he wants.
Yep.
Why is Gawain not able? Why does he struggle so hard with keeping this promise? He gets up there, he's doing the thing, and he has this moment of truth, and then he fails.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, he fails almost the entire time. Yeah. Right. I think that, you know, he tries to make the right decisions, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But, you know, he's afraid. And I think that that's part of what's going on. He's afraid when he confronts the Green Knight at the beginning, and he makes a stupid decision because he's afraid. Mm-hmm. And then he finally gets to that point at the very very end, where we are treated to, you know, a good 20 minutes in which of an alternate timeline, which we don't know is an alternate timeline.
It's like La La Land.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So, medieval La La Land. Which would be a great like amusement park. Maybe?
Somewhere in the line, Thomas Lecoq is like lifting his head to talk about this right now.
Yeah, we're both gonna get texts from him, like just like, "Hey, you guys okay? Like,
you guys all right?
My ears are burning.
How you feeling? Right? You guys are piano, right?"
So yeah, but finally he kind of makes a decision, and I think it's really just because he's afraid, because he's confronting death. Mm. Right. Which again, it just makes it such a human story about it. Like this is a guy who's had every benefit. And even in the kind of interim before he kind of sets out to meet the Green Knight after a year, like it shows just kind of clips of him as like, he hasn't learned anything, man. Like he's just in bars, he's getting drunk, he's, you know, at the whorehouse, you know, doing his thing. And he just doesn't, you know, he's not trying to better himself or prepare or anything like that. He's just trying to, but I think it's clear there, like he's afraid. You know, I think in the beginning, he's kind of afraid. He hasn't had the opportunity to become a knight, but he hasn't sought anything out because he is Arthur's nephew. Yeah. Right. And he has like this reputation in some ways to live up to, which I think is really interesting because it's also playing with the Gawain myth that's kind of surrounding this as well. It's weird. Like, and what I mean by that is like everybody he meets already knows him. Mm-hmm. There's no way that could actually happen. But like when he meets Joel Edgerton and the wife, they already know him. The kids who chase after him as he leaves, they already know him. When he goes into a bar, people know him. You know, when he meets Winifred, she knows who he is. Like there's no way that anybody should know who he is, but they know Gawain because they know the stories about Gawain. So he's trying to live up to that, and it's just a really neat, I think, thing that the movie's trying to do. But that's why he's afraid, and he's afraid both of what he can become, but also, you know, what he thinks is going to be his impending death. And it's only when he confronts the reality of that he kind of succeeds. He finally makes the right choice.
Yeah, I want to say like this, we're only seeing a year in this man's life. And I'm kind of thinking about this in terms of like who we know Gawain is later. And maybe the great story, because we know Gawain later as this great and noble dude who does generally the right thing and he represents well and blah, blah, blah. Isn't it a far more interesting story to see Gawain as not always this guy who was a great and noble guy, but as a man who really stumbled and fell and struggled and then eventually overcomes that, right? I mean, is that what maybe this film's trying to do, or the story is trying to say is like, wait a second, this guy wasn't always this, and therefore this is what it's trying to reflect. Is that you too, peasant, because I don't know who's reading. Like Matt, who's reading or listening or having these stories told to them?
So great story. Short answer is not sure. Nobody's really sure. So Gawain and the Green Knight, especially this poem specifically, it exists in one manuscript. It lives it exists in the British Library right now. It was written in the 14th century. That's mostly what we know. It's written in older Middle English. So not in Latin or anything like that. There's probably some evidence that it existed kind of as when we have. Sorry. Let me back up. There's probably a good reason to think that when we have single surviving manuscripts like this, Beowulf is another one, like it exists in one kind of manuscript, but very famous and rightly so, is that it existed as a story beforehand. And we can't discount the possibility that there were other manuscripts that have since been lost. Like we've lost tons of manuscripts to fires, to World War II bombings, all sorts of stuff like that. So we don't really know kind of what used to be out there that's not out there. But that being said, is that it seems like a lot of these stories were recounted. And that would be by traveling minstrels or by paid storytellers or something like that, or they just could be kind of folk tales that were kind of told about the story. And I think that's the neat thing about this particular story, is that because it's coming very late in the medieval tradition of Arthur, is that that's probably what's happening, is that people have heard kind of the heroic Gawain of Chrétien de Troyes, of Geoffrey of Monmouth, and people like that. And then somebody decided like, well, what's the prequel? Who was this guy before? Was he a person? And they made this incredibly human, interesting kind of figure out of him. And so that would be of interest, not just to, we often think of most of these stories just being aimed at the elites, and they certainly were aimed at the elites. This would be a very interesting story, I think, to aristocrats and kings and people like that. But I think to the middle class as well, because these people know these stories. It's very clear that the middle class and kind of lower classes know these stories. And like, there's something universal about Gawain and the Green Knight, and about what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to behave honorably? And like, what happens when you're confronted with these with these types of situations? Not necessarily magical ones, but these types of difficulties that could be similar to other people's lives.
Usually when we do these pods, I try to give the guest a few different questions ahead of time, so you know what to expect. By now, you know what to expect on these things. But I purposely said, I'm not going to give you all the questions here, Matt. And that bought me some time, because I didn't even write them up, because I spent a few minutes earlier writing these here earlier to see how far we can go, Dr. Gabriele. So I've got a few questions for you here that I have not prepped you for whatsoever. We'll
Fantastic.
see if you can respond. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Better medieval hero, this Gawain or Monty Python's Lancelot?
This Gawain, by a long shot.
By a lot. Yeah. He doesn't kill everyone at the wedding.
He does not kill everyone at the wedding. Like, that's another really.
Have we not done that movie on the pod by now?
You haven't?
We haven't.
Dear Lord. Okay. I mean,
do we just pencil you and David, and do we get the four back together?
Remedy that as soon as possible.
Okay, we're getting the four back together.
1,000%.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Gawain, by a long shot, like, more interesting character. I mean, like, John Cleese's Lancelot is absolutely kind of delightful, and again, and like a really interesting take by Monty Python, of course, medievalists. Studied medieval history at university, but like Gawain is like that kind of straight-laced kind of jerk, like in a lot of the stories. So it fits, but Gawain definitely.
All right. More terrifying, the Green Knight or medieval honor culture?
Oh, well, I mean, they're kind of the same thing. So can I do that? Like,
go for it,
and can I
spell it
bust
out.
your question in half? So I mean, the Green Knight, in the way, both in the poem and in the film, I think they function kind of similarly in that they're representing a force that exists outside of people that is immutable. Like he's kind of nature in that sense, like because he's green, he represents kind of the earth and stuff like that. That's part of the symbolism of the greenness. There's such a great little monologue that Lady Bertilac, Alicia Vikander's kind of character at the end, kind of gives about like what is green. Green is left. What does she say? Like green is what happens after red, like after love, after lust. Like green is what's left after those kind of passions and stuff like that. Oh, it's amazing. It's the moss that grows. Like it's great little monologue. Anyway, but it's also kind of the way that people like Gawain and the rest of the knights are kind of constrained by their behaviors, right? Like he has to go. He did a thing. He is honor bound to follow that through. Like whatever else he may decide along the way, he's going to meet that Green Knight later on because he's made that vow. And so I think that's why I see that as kind of part of the same thing, is that he represents a force, like both nature, but also kind of the intellectual culture that surrounds them and constrains them.
More realistic setting, the Green Knight or Braveheart?
It's not Braveheart.
It's never Braveheart.
It's never
Braveheart.
Yeah. No.
That should be the next pod. No. It's never Braveheart. We haven't done Braveheart in this pod either.
I have some thoughts about Mel Gibson, but that we can save those for.
Can we pause for a second and talk about Mel Gibson? Because I have to treat Mel Gibson like I treat Michael Jackson. Like I'm great with Mel to a point till I find out about Mel. Right?
Yeah.
I'm like, God damn it, Mel, you were my dude. Lethal Weapon, you were my guy. Mad Max, all the things, you were my guy. And
all he had to do was just shut the fuck up.
And
but he decided to get drunk and be a raging anti-Semite. So that really sucks.
He was probably a raging anti-Semite.
He was. Yeah, I think he was. That didn't suddenly appear.
Alcohol doesn't have that transformative property, my friend. It just amplifies.
It just amplifies things.
The things, right? Okay.
So I would say, I would say the Green Knight. I think that the other thing that's kind of problematic about Braveheart, it's kind of like Game of Thrones runs into in some point. Not Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which I agree with you is a delight.
It's great.
Like it was a fun, interesting thing. Is that it thinks of the medieval only as violent and kind of dirty and terrible, in which awful people do awful things to everybody all the time. And the point of Braveheart, right, is like Mel Gibson's character. He's just trying to be like this great kind of, husband and lover and stuff like that. But like all these evil people. What Gawain is doing is that it's more realistic in that everything is really complicated. They're human beings who inhabit this world. Whereas, Braveheart's just all about kind of cardboard cutouts. So,
yeah. We haven't talked about the fox yet. I feel like we need to talk about the fox. So much of what I work with in my real job as a tribal liaison, as a Native American historian, is talk about like animals in indigenous culture and so forth. Fox, like the coyote, is often a trickster figure, things like that.
Yep.
What does the fox represent in the Green Knight?
Yeah, I think the fox is one of them I kind of struggle with. I mean, I think it's the mom. Right. Like the mom is kind of connected to that and like kind of keeping an eye on him. But in the sense that it is making sure that he continues on the quest, right? Like when we meet him, when we meet the fox, so he is kind of starving, he's wandering. The fox kind of helps, kind of guides him a little bit, like gets him out of the storm and kind of keeps him company just to kind of make sure that he's thing. Disappears once, he reaches Gawain reaches the castle with Joel Edgerton, Bertilac, and Bertilac's wife. Happens to have been captured, but like I think it's just kind of a narrative plot device. We don't need him, and now Gawain's going off on his own. He's leaving the castle, so the fox reappears at that time. But then confronts him and tells him not to continue on, or at least warns him about things. And then Gawain responds in a really I think he kind of gets it, like that it's his mom kind of keeping tabs on him, because like what does he say? Like he yells like a teenager. He's like, "I never asked you to join me anyway," and like off the fox. Kind of
oh my god, scampers, I've got
right?
to
yeah. But I think and I think that's what it is, and like within English culture as well. Like if you've ever been to England, like there's a lot of foxes. Like the foxes are just kind of everywhere. So, and they have this particular kind of omnipresence as kind of having a connection to the natural world in a way that humans don't. But at the same time, like, can you trust them? I don't know. Like maybe not.
I want to ask you about another mythical creature.
Mm.
Is David Perry lying about the fish he catches?
No, that man's a good fisherman. I gotta say.
Damn it.
Yeah.
He and I are due for a trip.
Oh, that would be, that would be worlds colliding in like the best
What cost
way,
do I ever have to go back to Minnesota of all places? I don't have small ties to his employer there. One word to describe this movie as a historian.
One word. So the word that immediately comes to mind is just fun. And let me say that my wife strongly disagrees with me.
When does she get to come on this pod? I want her to be on this pod. Like to like negate everything you have to say.
I would be delighted. I'll recommend it. I'll recommend it to
Love
her.
it. Tell her to pick a film out.
She should. Yeah, I mean, she works on. She has a PhD in urban geography, and so
actually she should be on this pod.
Yeah, and then like works on her dissertation was on Detroit and revitalization and policy proposals and stuff like that. So like history of urbanization and
8 miles just waiting for us.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, it's right there. So
right.
I'll
tell the other doctor in the home that.
That's right. The other Dr. Gabriele.
Go ahead.
But she strongly disagrees. She thinks this is an incredibly tedious movie, and I have forced her to watch it several times. So I'm sorry.
Maybe she thinks it's tedious because you're forcing her to watch this.
Well, that's probably true too. That's probably fair. So, but anyway, I mean, marriages are complicated. But I think I find it really fun, and I think that to me, it's like some of my colleagues really don't like it, like medievalists really don't like it. A lot of them are, because it does make some significant changes from the poem, I'll say. And so people who really, really like the poem, and it's a really fun poem and people really enjoy reading it, like then you can kind of get like, well, why do they do this instead of that or something like that? But I think if you just kind of let it go as a story in which the medieval setting in some ways incidental to the story it's trying to tell about this person, this person Gawain and his experiences, then I think you can just really enjoy the cinematography and also just the performances, which are just so fantastic.
Okay, so this is where I was going to get you uncomfortable because I know how much you love this film. So one of the things I wrote down was, tell me, Matt, why I shouldn't like this movie. Is it because of the changes it makes to it? Like if I'm a snobby medievalist or whomever, why? What's your beef with this film?
So if you were a snobby medievalist, then definitely like the changes to the poem or to the plot of the story.
Are we allowed to be friends with snobby medievalists? Do we have them?
I mean, absolutely. I am a snobby medievalist, just not about this film.
Damn it, I am a friend with them. Okay.
So.
All right, keep going.
You are a friend with a snobby medievalist. So
God damn it.
Yeah, unfortunately. So I think some of the changes, like the narrative changes. So in the poem, this is not like a spoiler for the film or anything like that. In the poem, the guy, Joel Edgerton's character, he's a character named Bertilac, Lord Bertilac. He's the Green Knight. Like it turns out he's the Green Knight. And so there's a connection there. So the whole experience at the castle, which lasts a lot longer, it lasts over 3 days, and there's lots more kind of stuff that happens there. That's a prelude to the test. Like he's kind of getting him ready, getting Gawain ready for this encounter, which will happen. There's a clear moral ending at the end. The Green Knight does not cut off his head. And in fact, the Green Knight gives him the sash, that magical sash that Gawain wears for the rest of his life as kind of a reminder of his failures. Like, and so it's a much more kind of moral story about like,
oh shit. I just had a thought.
So it totally kind of changes that kind of stuff. The other thing too is like that I will say from like a filmic perspective, though I'm not a media studies person or anything like that, or a film critic, is that it doesn't do a great job sometimes of explaining kind of what's happening and why things are happening. So in that way, it rewards repeat viewing, but I could see that being a critique as well. So sorry, you had an epiphany.
I literally just did as you were talking, and that's you and I were talking a little bit earlier about how you always learn something in these pods, or like when you're talking and you're doing the reading stuff like that. Here's my epiphany.
Okay,
is this movie not The Cave in Empire Strikes Back?
It's not The Cave. No, I hadn't thought of that. Sure.
I mean, he goes to this place. This is a dude looking for a father figure, doesn't listen, isn't growing, lights up, pulls up the lightsaber, strikes the dude down, fails in the cave.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of wondering how much now this is Empire Strikes Back. That particular sequence is influenced by this because Lucas pulls from mythology.
Yep. Oh yeah, no, definitely. Like, yeah, you could probably make a case, and I think it'd be a really interesting case to say that if you started from Luke's encounter in the cave in Dagobah and then ended with Luke's duel with Vader in Jedi, that's roughly the arc of, if you just follow Luke.
Yeah.
That's roughly the arc of Gawain and the Green Knight.
I don't even know.
It's all Star Wars. It's all Star
Wars. And like that makes every Star Wars purchase I make tax deductible. Thank you.
That's right.
Best Arthurian film. What do you got?
Best Arthurian film. All right. Let's leave aside Green Knight for a minute.
Okay.
And so then it's Monty Python. Monty Python, the Holy Grail.
Why?
By a long shot. I think, again, like it gets the vibe of the Arthurian stories kind of right. Everything else is just so kind of too serious about itself, and Monty Python really kind of plays with the idea of Arthur and the knights as well, in really interesting ways.
Yeah, there's this beautiful thing. I think it's like, wait, this is maybe supposed to be a bit silly. Like some of these stories are supposed to be us, and they're giants. All these people here.
Well, like you were saying too, like we think of the Middle Ages as a period without fun, but these were people. Like they had fun. They told stories.
Thank you. Yeah. Right? I mean, that's
everybody in the past.
I had this great conversation the other day with a fellow scholar. Linford Fisher's got this great book coming out on indigenous slavery, and it's a terrific book. And he and I were debating, like, what's it like being a non-native guy doing native history, right? Which I am, Lynn is, and a slew of other folks are as well, right? And you're a non-medieval person doing medieval history. It turns out, right?
Yeah.
And I think that what I come back to is the idea that ultimately all of these stories, we're trying to get down to this human story. What does it mean to be human? And to realize that, like, no, people laughed.
They did
in 1170.
Yep.
People cried. People got married. They told stories of grandeur and like try to entertain themselves and whatever. I think that's one of the strengths of this film. But maybe to kind of come back to this and make this more of a historians at the movies kind of thing here is maybe the final big question I have for you is this. If this film and the original story itself are trying to tell us about the process of becoming a man and nobility and honor in this era, what's that story they're ultimately what is the Green Knight trying to tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways of answering that, and I think that they're not unrelated to one another, but I think they are separate. And what I mean by that is that one of them at a very basic level is that it's showing that people can make choices. And what I mean by that is that in a lot of the other Arthurian stories, for example, is that people march on kind of preset paths, in that that they're going to defeat the bad guy, that the Arthur's going to win, that the magical things will be overcome, that they will behave in a certain way because they are Knights of the Round Table. Gawain and the Green Knight, both in the poem and in the film, gives us the option, because he's clear. He says repeatedly, he's not a knight. He's not a knight yet. So he doesn't have to behave in this way. Like he's growing towards something. And so he has the option of doing something else. And that is, to me, is an incredibly human thing, is that when you are confronted by a situation, you have a choice. Like there's other kind of, social and cultural things that are, kind of limiting your choices in certain ways, but you can behave nobly towards a person, or you can behave, barbarously towards a person. But the other thing too is that it is ultimately, in a very interesting way, undermining. I mean, it's reinforcing, but it's kind of playfully undermining, maybe is a better way of saying, the idea of the aristocracy and the nobility. Because who is this guy really? Like the kings who are in charge of everything, the nobles who control the land, throughout the medieval period and stuff like that. Like they're kind of just like us, and in some ways that could be a revolutionary statement to a period to a place in a time that is incredibly hierarchical, in which there are kind of rigid social structures. So I think that's another really interesting thing, is that it's a way of either an aristocratic class kind of voicing displeasure at the way it itself is behaving, or a lower class, maybe a middle class, literate middle class, kind of writing up towards people and saying, like, who do you guys think you are? Really, like what makes you better than us ultimately?
We've been talking about the story now for that's like 1,000 years old, older than that. What happens for you next? You're done now, almost for the semester. Like what are your students doing? Like, do your students talk about this film? Like what are you students?
No,
what are you
doing? So last year I was teaching. I'm not teaching anything kind of related to that right now, but last year I was teaching like my intro medieval course, and we read Gawain and the Green Knight, the poem, and I gave them, I screened. They had to watch the film, but I did a screening of it, and so I reserved a classroom and showed it, and I brought them popcorn and candy and stuff like that if they came, and like 10 out of the 30 students showed up. It was great. We had a good time. One of them looked at me at the end of the screening, and I will remember this forever, and he said, "Professor Gabriele, can I ask you a question?" He's like, yeah, of course. Like, yeah, it's about the film. It's like, yeah. It's like, can I say a bad word? It's like, sure. It's like, why the fuck did you make us watch that? I was like, that is such a good question. Thank you so much. Yes. And I want you to save that question for class, the next day. So we kind of talked about it. So students don't know about it. Most people don't know about it. Like it did fairly well kind of at the box office. It came out kind of like right at the tail end of the pandemic. So I think it kind of missed out on a lot of that. Medievalist also, again, we're a little bit ambivalent about it. Not that we drive, a lot of ticket sales, but I don't see it being like assigned a lot. I like to assign it because, again, it is a reimagining in a medieval mode to me of this type of tale, and I think there's something worth talking about there.
Yeah, we're actually going to do. I think what we're going to try to do is align this pod with the watch party that I do, because it's available on
fantastic.
I think Netflix right now, and we'll get at least a few more people watching this, because I think this is a fun film to talk about.
It is such
a break down and talk about like this era. So, what comes next for you on the pod? Like, what do you guys have lined up over there on American Medieval? Who do you have coming up?
So we have a great, as we're recording this at the beginning of April, is that we just released today, actually, the day that we're recording, a really great episode with a grad student over at the University of Leeds. She's an American, but she works on American comic books and how they think about the Middle Ages. So like all the way back to like Jack Kirby and kind of the golden age of
I'm going to have her on the pod.
That. She was great. Natalie Hopwood, University of Leeds graduate student, fantastic.
Okay. Send me, I'll have to get her contact info.
I'll shoot you her email address. And I mean, she's easily to find on the Google too.
Sure.
Then we have a great crossover episode with this podcast called Reckoning with Jason Herbert coming out soon, in which it's an oldie but a goodie, an old episode of Reckoning that we're releasing on our podcast stream to acquaint everybody with medievalist thoughts on the movie Kingdom of Heaven. About the Crusades, and medievalists do have some thoughts on Kingdom of Heaven. And then we have an episode after that on medieval video games, and then we have one on medieval art, and especially kind of Black American memories of the Middle Ages in the 19th and 20th century. We talk a lot about Kehinde Wiley, the painter and artist, with Matt Vernon. And because April which is when we're recording this, April is Medievalism Month on the podcast. So we're talking about different ways the medieval has been remembered in American culture.
I cannot keep up with the months. People are like, "Oh, we're this month." I'm like, "Guys, stop!"
It's my first time.
I have no idea what day it is.
It's exhausting, so I'm probably not going to.
Thank you. Listen, try running a movie watch party for 8 years, and people are like, "Oh, it's Left-Handers Month." I'm like, "For fuck's sake, already!" Like, okay, let me get on Prime and see what I got. So, dude, we did this again. Thank you for coming back.
This has been fantastic. Thanks again for having me, Jason.
It's always fun. Like, you and I get together and hang out and drink and do the things and so forth. So this was a blast. So thank you.
All right. Thanks again.
And that's a wrap here at Reckoning with Jason Herbert. Thank you again to my dear friend Matt Gabriele for coming back in. You guys absolutely check out his podcast, American Medieval. He's doing such cool stuff over there, and he has such amazing guests. I love the show. I listen to it regularly. Check it out. It's amazing. Another amazing person is our producer, Fletcher Powell, for continuing to produce this show. Fletcher, thank you for everything you do. Most of all, thank you to all of you for continuing to show up, show out, and share this podcast with your friends. If you want to help support us, you can go to my Substack and subscribe there. Or the best thing you can do is continue to share this podcast on social media. That'll help get us in front of new audiences, or hell, just repost the shit that I post. Anyway, this has been an Arthurian journey with you. Thank you so much for being here. We've got a bunch of stuff coming your way. Until then, ciao for now. Bye.